Max Steel is directed by Stuart Hendler, written by Christopher L. Yost. It's based on the toy line of the same name by Mattel and stars Ben Winchell, Maria Bello, Andy Garcia, and Anna Villafañe, and features the voice of Josh Brenner as Steel. And Max Steel is a superhero origin story about a kid, Max McGrath, played by Ben Winchell, who moves back to his childhood town and discovers that he can now emit some vaguely defined energy from his body. So a robot called Steel shows up and sort of, but not really, informs him of his destiny to become a sort of superhero defender of the planet or something. Now, after I watched this movie and after I tweeted about how much I hated it, spoiler alert, I hated this movie, my friend asked me, so why did I see it in the first place? And that's a really good question that I do not have an answer to yet. I guess it's because I'm interested in superhero movies in general, and I really wanted to see more of them that just aren't based on comic books, and Max Steel fit the bill. Now, I am a firm believer that Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and these review aggregator sites, they're not there for you to, base your opinions on. I mean, like, you can't just look at the number and then decide, oh, it's a bad movie. Like, it's just a guide to help you figure out how critics think and whatnot. However, right now Max Steel has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it absolutely deserves it. It's not just one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen, it is one of the worst movies I've seen, period. I'm very confident in saying that. It's just such a poorly made film with some really annoyingly lifeless acting and just a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a superhero movie good. Now, the trailer to Max Steel might trick you into thinking that there are good visuals in this movie, and it's clear as you're watching the film that a bulk of the budget went into animating Steel and Max's energy emissions, but the CGI in the movie really just falls short of believable. It's not terrible CGI, but it's nothing impressive either. The trailers also might have you believe that there is one big fight scene in this movie with Max against like a tornado or something, but rest assured that that fight scene only lasts for like a few seconds literally, so there's nothing for you here. Where this movie gets terrible is everywhere else. First of all, the cinematography, which is by Brett Pollack. When this movie isn't criminally underlit, it has like really bright lights from behind just obscuring the scene, or having bright lights strobing throughout the scenes, and this really actually made my head hurt while I was watching it. The costumes also look really, really cheap, like cheap cosplay, which is not to discredit cosplayers, it's just that when you have a $20 million movie, your costumes should look better than how they look here. They also tried to do that Iron Man thing where it's like a shot of Max's face inside his helmet, but it looks really, really bad and green screened. The sound in Max Steel is also really inconsistent, and I'm sure it wasn't just because of the theater I was in, because throughout the movie I was straining to hear certain bits of dialogue, but at the same time the action scenes and stuff were really, really loud in comparison. And of course, this is all underscored by a really generic Hans Zimmer-esque musical score from Nathan Lanier. And this made me think about this video from the YouTube channel Every Frame a Painting, where he talks about how the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't really have memorable music in it. It's a sentiment I agree with, but I think that Marvel can kind of get away with it because for the most part, most of their movies really are good, and they can make up for the fact that they don't have memorable music. However, in Max Steel, I think they needed anything they could have gotten just to redeem this movie in any way, but nothing can save it. And the editing in this movie, oh my god, the editing in this movie by Michael Lewis Hill, from the very beginning you can just tell something is wrong. Like, towards the beginning there's a dinner scene that happens with Ben Winchell, Maria Bello, and Andy Garcia. And this dinner scene is intercut with like this Stranger Things-esque introduction at this facility. And the way these two sequences are spliced together is so jarring and so unnatural. The rhythm of one sequence does not match with the rhythm of the other sequence at all. It's really something you have to see to believe, but the best way I can describe it is it's the equivalent of trying to talk to someone while someone else screams in your face every 5 seconds. It's really annoying and you don't get anything out of it. This movie seems to not understand the purpose of film editing. When you put two clips together, you try to form a meaning between those two clips, but here, just because they're splicing these two things together, there's no connection made between them. It's just so clearly a lame attempt to keep things interesting, which betrays their lack of faith in the writing, because they knew that the dinner scene had nothing interesting to offer, so they just decided to put in this random action scene which does not help in any way. And that's frankly pretty disrespectful to the audience. And the rest of the movie in terms of pace is either slow as hell or it's really, you know, montagey. Like there's so many scenes here that are just cut, and you just can't tell what's happening. Now this movie would still be kind of tolerable to watch if any of the actors were good, and none of them are good. Ben Winchell turns in one of the most soulless and generic performances I think I've ever seen from a leading actor in a superhero movie. He is just so devoid of personality, such a vapid character. And so we can't really connect with him on any human level. He really doesn't come across as a real human being at times, because there are scenes where Max should be feeling a lot more conflicted and anguished than Ben Winchell makes him seem. Anna Villafania and Maria Bello both have barely anything to do in this movie, and whenever they interact with Ben Winchell, there's no chemistry among them. And I was really embarrassed to see Andy Garcia in this movie, who really hams it up as hard as he can, but he just cannot overcome how weak this material is. And then we've got Josh Brenner, who voices Steel, and I couldn't stand it. Like, he's so annoying, and you know how a lot of people talk about how much they hate Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. That's how much I hated Steel in this movie. He kind of sounds like Jesse Eisenberg, but not a good actor, and it just drove me crazy every time he spoke. And if you're thinking you can watch Max Steel just for fun, you know, shove popcorn in your face, you're not even gonna get that with this movie, because it doesn't even have the typical formulaic superhero beats that you would expect, because the plot of this movie builds itself on such thin, lazy mythology that's about as deep in substance as the back of a toy box. You know, the description there that kind of gives context as to who the toy is about or whatever, like that's how deep the story goes. And Max as a character is just so impossible to access because you barely see him react to or engage with his world in a believable way. He's on autopilot in his own movie. The relationship between him and Steel is weirdly undefined. Like, you can't really tell if they like each other. Like, towards the end, obviously, it portrays them as friends, but you don't buy it at all. This movie also tries to build a romance between him and Sophia, who's played by Anna Villafania, and you don't buy it either because it comes across as really creepy, because she just kind of keeps forcing him to meet up with her at restaurants and whatever, and she keeps almost bumping into him with her car. And he just kind of goes along with it, and it doesn't feel like two real human beings interacting. And of course, so much of the dialogue in this movie is boring exposition or lines that just sound really unnatural. But the biggest sin of this movie is the fact that it tries to set up a sequel or a franchise, and good luck with that. It is not going to earn back its budget at all. Now, I hesitate to credit the director Stuart Hendler with this film because it feels like it was made by committee. You know, it feels like most of the worst superhero movies that really don't have any real directorial style behind it. You know, you can tell different angles where this movie could have gone, but they never really commit to one tone, so as a result, everything just feels so generic and boring. Even with how the action is done, all the stunts are so lame and you can barely see what's happening. This whole movie really feels like a cheaply made web video that comes in a CD in a cereal box, or it feels like extra content that would come from, like, if you buy a toy, a Max Steel toy, then there's like a password you can input on their website, and then you'll get this movie for free. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like it belongs in theaters. Max Steel is a really terrible film. It is easily one of the worst movies of the year, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And it really teaches me to be thankful about the big studios that are doing comic book superhero movies, because they at least kind of know what they're doing. Even if you feel superhero fatigue, be thankful that we have more of those and not more of Max Steel. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Max Steel. If you guys have seen it, please tell me what you thought about it. And whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.